Welcome to the Paru Zings Appraisers on Purpose podcast. This podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the industry? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome back. We are excited to have another opportunity to talk with a peer about their life in this profession and just allow each of us to take what we will from their experience and apply it to our own journey about where we're at or where we might be going and what might be next. So I'm thoroughly grateful for this opportunity to have a conversation with George, and just a dynamic individual and a phenomenal background, one that most of us will never have, but it gives us a perspective of what might be possible, especially during these times of disruption that we're experiencing right now. So George, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.
Hey man, I appreciate it. We love to ask the first opening question. So were you born this way, or how did you get into the industry?
Oh man, I wasn't born into the industry at all. My story's a little different. We're going to school, taking business, working at Sparkletts Water as a business sales rep, driving a water truck, and wasn't sure what I wanted to do with school, just taking the classes and going through the motions. I've always had a fascination with real estate back till I was young. I was buying lots of land in Hawaii when my friends were buying PlayStations and Nintendos and stuff. So I've always had a real interest in real estate and kind of wanted to go that direction, but I wanted to get done with school first. Once I was on my route, I had set customers every day to deliver to. I kind of saw all the sides of real estate. I saw the sales office with the lady with the big hair, and the mortgage office with a exotic car lot outside, and I saw all that side of it, and I wasn't sure where I kind of could fit into that. But there was one older gentleman that was on my route, and he and his wife worked in a little office, and he'd always have the baseball game on, have a beer on the desk, and just I said, man, Art, what do you do? This seems like a cool position. What do you do? And he says, oh, I'm an appraiser. I'm a real estate appraiser. And I said, that's interesting. Can you tell me about it? And he said, you know what? If you are really interested, come back at the end of your day and open my books up and I'll show you what I can do, what I do. And I said, okay. So I finished my route up. I went through all the loan offices, and they were always trying to recruit you in and different, So I got there at the end of the day, and I'm sweaty, and it's raining, and I'm wet, and he, of course, he's got a baseball game on, and he's working. It looks like the cush job. So I got to talking to him, and I said, I'm back. I really want to hear what you do. And he said, nobody ever comes back. So take a seat. Let me open it up. And he showed me, I love my business. And he showed me how to ration his clientele to make sure that, the ebbs and flows. He showed me what he made, and my eyes almost bulged out of my face. And I said, man, you make that much, and you don't leave the office? And, he said, yeah. And
meanwhile, you're out there actually delivering water.
Right.
I mean, like you said, you've been rained on. You've been dealing with the elements.
Seriously, I'm delivering water in the rain, parking, and everything else. So I said, man, I'm open ears. I want to hear this. So he shows me all that, tells me all that. I'm 100% hooked in at this point. And he says, but I can't hire you, and no one's going to hire you. So that's going to be your biggest challenge, but good luck. So then I started taking the classes, and I said I was determined I wanted to give it a try, and I started talking to different people and met a commercial appraiser in MAI as well. He took me in and said, yeah, I'll show you what I do. And he worked he said, you need you to manage my office. I'm not going to train you at appraising yet, but manage my office. And I told him I have a job and I'm going to school, but I'll do it on the around it. So I did that for a while. I managed his office. He did golf course appraisals. That was what he specialized in. So he would fly throughout the country and play golf and do golf course appraisals. And I sat and typed in a little room. It wasn't the best introduction to commercial appraising, but I did really enjoy it. So I did that for a while with him and learned kind of the business side of it. And a residential appraiser asked me to help him out, and I started training under him and kind of went on from there. Kind of got into the industry that way. So little unorthodox way when you hear people say my uncle's an appraiser and my dad was an appraiser. I definitely didn't have that.
No, that's fascinating. And that you got a start by being around the office side of a commercial appraiser doing golf courses. I was just going to ask, did you not get an invitation to the Pro Tour? I mean, isn't that...
Everything. I got an invitation to stay and type, and that's it.
Oh, man. Oh.
Yeah. So
makes you sit back and wonder, what if I just going on that way? I'd just be flying around on people's golf courses.
Right.
But instead, you got introduced to the residential side of it. How did that go? So you go from being in the office typing to over in the residential space. What was that like for you?
I really enjoyed it. I loved getting out into houses and talking to people and seeing the different architectures and areas. So I really liked it a lot. I started doing my training hours and working with the appraiser, scheduling and helping out with that side of it. I eventually got licensed and stayed on with him for a little bit more and just helping him out. And then I left for a little bit, and then he was having some issues with the office. He didn't really understand how to run the office like I was running it. So he asked me for some help. So I went back, helped him for a little bit while I started mine up. And then, I got going, and we kind of launched off pretty well, where I had a staff of about 5 to 6 appraisers at all times. Sometimes they a little higher, a little lower. But yeah, that was it. Stayed doing that until the REO kind of collapsed, kind of started taking off in 2008-9. And then I went into the corporate side.
Wow. You had field experience at length for a while, and sounds like you got to get back out in the field and get rained on, much like when you were delivering water, but this time it was for residential appraisals.
Yeah, I took an approach that was a little different than what a lot of appraisers, I'm in Southern California in Orange County, where there's, an appraiser on every corner, it seems like. So it was really difficult when it slowed down to get business. I really made the decision early that I'm going to stop competing with everybody in Los Angeles County and San Diego County. And there's a little island, Catalina Island, out here off the coast here. So I just said, I'm going to get to know that market. I went out there, met all the agents, and really focused on where I live, the Orange County and Catalina Island. So I had this where I specialized in. So I didn't do as many appraisals, but I was able to get a little higher price and make up for it with the price instead of the volume.
I think that's such an astute perspective, and we've heard some perspectives from others as well, but I think a lot of people haven't had that opportunity or haven't considered that approach, which is sometimes slowing down and doing less actually equals more.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's what I'm hearing and what you were sharing around. You made a conscious choice. You invested in yourself. I think it's Warren Buffett that's credited for saying the best investment you can make in any time, and specifically slow times, is in yourself because of the ROI. And as a result, you also cultivated relationships, and that opened up a new, call it, line of work for you.
Yeah, it definitely helped out, and it kind of changed my path because I really, when I was first starting off in residential, the first appraiser I was working with, I worked for a couple, but the first one, all he wanted was track home easy assignments, and he would turn down all the tough ones, and I always wanted the tough ones. I wanted to learn, get better at it. That's what I wanted the waterfront, big $12 million house, and he wanted to track home that with a PUD. So taking on those different assignments, on that small island, there's only so many sales, and there's only so many. You can only go so far back. You can't just go expand your search. So you're really forced to do some different methods than what the typical appraisal is going to do. So it worked. It made me better for sure. And I kind of spun that off to do high-end homes in Orange County and really stopped competing with everybody. I was having people call me instead of me begging them for work. So it definitely changed the path.
Wait a minute. Make sure I heard you properly, George. Did you say you actually, to use a corporate term, got out of the rat race? Instead of being a little squirrel trying to find a nut, you had people bringing nuts to you saying, would you please take this on?
Yeah, it worked out. I mean, I definitely think it pays to specialize. If you're just saying, I'm like everybody else and I won't work, you're not going to stand out from anything. So really by taking on those high-end assignments and doing that, I know a couple appraisers here would probably both know them in common, and they really focus on the high-end real estate. So every time there's a high-end property that we're dealing with at the appraisal management company, I think of those people that really specialize in that, I reach out to them first. So because they've done a good job of letting everybody know what they do, and they're not interested in the easy assignments. They want the hard ones, and having that, to date myself here, a Rolodex to be able to go back to figure out who does this, who specializes in this. I'm going to call them, and they're going to charge more. We know that, and the client's okay with that, but you get what you pay for.
I think that's a fascinating and important perspective. I hope many people really take to heart. I think the late Stephen Covey, who was known for a statement of sharpening the saw, and that is continuing to invest and improve. And as you point out, move into a direction where there's less competition. And result, you not only get better, if you only take on easy stuff, you never can handle the hard ones. And that doesn't mean that taking it on is easy. Many times it's really hard the first time.
Yeah.
But like, who's ever good the first time you do something?
Right.
I mean, you're just not very good, but you work through it and you get to an acceptable conclusion. And the second time it's a little less difficult, and the third. And then at one point you're kind of like, this isn't so hard. Well, of course it's not very hard, because how many hours, tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of hours you've been doing it? I totally hear that. That's fascinating. So how come you didn't stay as the appraiser to the stars there up and down the Golden West Coast?
Yeah, so this was kind of meant to be temporary, and it worked out to be a long temporary. But I had my office, I had 5 staff appraisers at the time, and the market just stopped. So really there wasn't enough work to go around. So I made the decision to take a W-2 job and help a friend out that was at a startup, not a startup, but they were at they were a longer company for REO, but they were really, when the REO was picking up, they were inundated with work. So went over there, went to a lender first, helped them kind of build out their appraisal department. I really was trying to focus on how to build a better business for appraising instead of just better appraisals. So I went to a lender, helped them build out their forensic team. This is right when the market, like I said, was really at its worst. And then a friend of mine that I worked with at that office went to a company and they specialized in REO. And he said, we really need your help here. We're really good at BPOs. We're really good in all the other products, but on appraisals, we're not real strong in, and we need it to be built out. They're coming in fast. So I went there and helped them build that out. And like I said, I was meant to be temporary so I can keep all my employees hired and working, and I can give all the assignments that I was doing over to them and keep them afloat. But as the market went, the mortgage market, it kept going lower and lower and lower to a point where it just wasn't viable to keep an office and keep all the staff on.
So one of the interesting things, which is always so insightful, and many people, you're a very accomplished individual, generally understated individual. A lot of people kind of may know, at least maybe have seen your name or maybe know a place or two that you've worked, but more particularly, they may not actually understand, how does somebody actually get from, hey, I was literally delivering water and kind of got started in the appraisal space, to, hey, I actually am involved in at this point in my career in a role that has a significant influence over a lot of professionals. How did that path go? What was your yellow brick road like from being a field appraiser to ultimately becoming a chief appraiser?
No, it's different than what I was doing before. I just worked hard, and I've always been good with people, and I've always tried to understand the other person's perspective. So looking at that, working with appraisers closely and building those relationships and treating people well. So as I worked harder and harder, I kept on my education in appraising. I got my designations. I stayed with it. I got everything I could get. Anytime I could take a class, anytime I can learn more about it or take a hard assignment to learn, I did. I kept up in all my local chapters. I, really built those relationships out. And when an opportunity came up, I've always thrown my hat in the ring. I want to be considered for anything. So it's an intimidating field for sure, because there's people that have been doing this for 40 and 50 years, and they've been doing it a long time and really well connected. But I think you just got to take that plunge, and, whatever you're not good enough at right now, you're going to learn. But there's a lot of resources out there to learn. And I think that coming from the commercial side of the business first, I really saw something different as far as a real camaraderie and helping each other out with business to be able to give, like we mentioned earlier, specialties. If I don't want to do this, I'm going to give it to the person who specializes in a lot of handoffs. And, I saw the value in the Appraisal Institute. I saw a lot of synergies there to be able to help each other out and succeed. So I really leaned on that kind of mentality with the residential side. And I still try to keep those networks really strong by having, monthly meetings with people and talk to people. And when there's an opportunity there, I think people want to work with who they get along with and who they connect with. So that connecting with people, this industry is so easy to kind of fall into your own little world, because a lot of us work from home. A lot of us don't take classes together. We just take online classes, work by ourselves, and you kind of fall into this isolation. So nowadays it's easier than ever to kind of get online like this and connect with somebody that you got to take advantage of it, because otherwise you're not going to find out when these opportunities come up to be able to move up into the industry.
I think that's a fascinating one about the being open to opportunities. As you said, just throwing your hat in the ring. It doesn't mean you're going to get selected, but if you don't even get in the ring, you don't even know what the process looks like, who to talk to, what are the conversations that happen at a different level.
Yeah, I think it's important, and, let your ego go a little bit and being able to start off and train with somebody that's maybe something that you wouldn't have considered before, because if you can learn a new side of the business. I took a step back and learned REO really well and worked on that side, which I never thought I would be interested in, because it's such a depressing side of the business, in all reality, when other people are at their worst, you're busy. So it's a hard side of the business, but it's important, and it helps lenders make, good decisions. So I really enjoyed that side of it. I got to know the business side of it really well, and to see that. So yeah, and I had to go back to a REO position after owning my own company and running that. So, but I'm glad I did, because I think it helped me out a lot to learn. I think if you just, like I said in the beginning, if you just stick with your same skill set, you don't try to expand at all, you're just going to be the same person you were. So you got to keep growing.
That's helpful, and a perspective I think some people try to avoid, and that is, well, I don't want to go backwards. But I heard you say that, look, I had to go take a review position after having my own company. How did that come to pass?
It was a friend of mine that was working at the company in a different area, not valuations, and said, "Hey, I've seen what you've done at the last bank you were at. You really turned around, because I worked with him there. You really turned that department around and got the team stronger and more structured. And that was the same model that I used for my personal office. So he said, would you come here and give this a try and just kind of help me kind of build this out?" So I did, and then the opportunity was there because of the REO business really taking off, far more than we thought it was going to. And I was already there and building some structure, so I just kind of naturally moved up into a leadership role, really trying to get them on a straight path to be able to be more productive and be a better service to their clients.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And, one of the things for people who haven't had an opportunity to either be in the industry or to be outside of field and on the corporate side of things, when you get into review, what are those involvements, activities, and responsibilities like compared to when you were in the field?
That's a great question. And I learned more from review than I ever did from any trainer I worked with or anybody else. In review, I learned such valuable lessons of what not to do and what to do really, really well. You take little bits and pieces from appraisers that you see that maybe approach it a little differently than you were trained or that you have in the past. And that side of it was really interesting. Unfortunately, you still have a lot of appraisers that look down on the review side by saying, oh, they couldn't cut it out here, or they don't do what we do. They sit in an office. And sure, there's some structure and some stability working for a company or in an office, but it has different challenges. I mean, I think your personal skills have to really take off. You have to connect with that appraiser when you have some issues. And I think that really what makes a successful company that has to work with contractor appraisers is because you really have to treat them well and understand their position and play that, figure out what that, what the minimum product you can get out is, because a lot of times you have two sides where the client wants one thing and the appraiser doesn't want to do anything close to that, and finding that middle ground where both of them are comfortable, the appraiser is comfortable, and you got to really educate the client on what they can ask for and what they can't ask for, and what the appraiser is capable of doing, and finding that middle ground. So I think it takes a different skill set for sure by working with both, really kind of sharpening your client skills, and also on the other side is your personal skills with the appraiser.
I think that's fascinating. What did you learn about appraising once you went over to review that you thought you knew, but you didn't once you got there?
I mean, really, man, there's so many.
I know there is, but I mean, just one or two that come to mind.
Yeah. I would think just supporting adjustments. I thought I knew, and I had a pretty good idea, but I worked in one little market where maybe one thing was really important and another thing wasn't. A pool or something like along those sides where we live is not as important as they are in other markets. So really, when I got on the review side, I started seeing how much the market reacts to so many different things that they would never have an impact here. So I think it really sharpened my adjustment skills by seeing the way appraisers approached it, just reconciliation altogether. I thought I was doing pretty well, and I thought I had a pretty strong reconciliation, but you see some appraisers where you really have to drop them an email and say, hey, great job. You blew me away with this. So, and I think from that, hey, I'm going to steal this. I'm going to steal a little bit of this method to be able to say, I got to write better than this too. So I think really those two for me were the biggest part of it. And and then just knowing how to do the specialty properties. If I look at a property being where I live, I'm not going to see a home with a huge basement or a windmill in the back, or I'm just not going to see a lot of things that other parts of the world are going to see. So seeing the way they approach those, I can kind of use those as parallels to things that I'm going to run into that are a little different than what other parts of the world do. So I think that made me really strong to be able to know how they're handling those specialty properties.
I definitely agree. There's I have at least found, sounds like you have as well, the more opportunities to put yourself in an unfamiliar, sometimes even an uncomfortable position is where growth happens. As you pointed out, someone you had an opportunity to work with who only did tract homes. Well, when you first start out, you may not know how to do a tract home, but then after that, every little single story, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath place that's 1,350 square feet, and the only real difference is, did they put a half wall in or not? And they're like, okay, maybe it had 2-car garage versus 1-car garage, or back patio versus not a back patio. Kind of once you've been through it, is there much more learning that's going to go on?
Yeah, you kind of hit that comfortable mode. And some people are good with that. I was never okay with that. I think I wanted to keep growing. I wanted to do more and learn more. But to his credit, he knew every floor plan, it seemed like, in every track home in that area. And so he could tell me what I'm going to run into before I go to the house. So yeah, I mean, it's whatever that's the beautiful thing about this industry is there's so many different paths you can go, and depending on what you want to do.
Along the way, I mean, that person definitely became a specialist within that product segment, and that works great for many people, and for others, not so much. Over the times, maybe early on, say that first, I don't know, roughly, not that you don't still do that now, but over those, say, first 10 years of your career, how much of your learning was on the job versus extracurricular, either in the form of like courses or mentoring or anything else?
I would say the first few years, I really didn't learn a lot, unfortunately, and not as much as I should have. I was really doing the same thing over and over, measuring, writing the basics, and then kind of looking over his shoulder while he wrote all of the narratives and did the adjustments. But as I got a little bit more comfortable with it, it really flourished inside the office. I had a great trainer for my second trainer, and I would sit down with him and go over the reports in detail, and he'd tell me not only what he's doing, but why he's doing it. And I'm just not smart enough to absorb unless I know why I'm doing it. So I need to hear the reason why I'm doing it in anything, not just appraising. If someone tells me to take this to there, I'm going to be the kid to ask is why am I taking this here to here? So I really need to know the why to the what. So that helps me a lot. And I think sitting there in an office and be able to figure out why they're doing that, what's up. And he was good to tell me, well, the underwriter's going to look at this and the lender's going to use this information to be able to make their decision and tell me the whole process. So if I know the end goal, then it helps me a lot to write the report up front. So I learned a lot in the office, walking through that process and learning kind of why we do on our side.
As you got into the corporate side, what enticed you to stay there versus going back into the field?
I really enjoy the business part of it. I really enjoy trying to build a successful business, do it the right way, work with good people. Unfortunately, it's, not all AMCs are built equal, and you're going to get lumped in with the bad ones sometimes on every forum, it seems like, but you're going to get lumped in with some bad ones. But yeah, just doing it the right way, working with good people and, building those client relationships. So I really learned that I enjoyed the business part of it by providing a good service to clients, doing it the right way, and going that route. As far as working inside of it, on your own, there's a lot of uncertainties that kind of come with that, with these times when it slows down and with my wife was staying home with our kids, it really gave some stability to work on the corporate side as well. So I did enjoy it. I do enjoy the business side of it. There's the same way as appraiser would kind of keep that drive to get more business and keep the clients happy. We're doing the same thing on this side, but I think it comes with a little bit more stability.
I can definitely see that as a little deeper pockets maybe than somebody operating an appraisal firm with just 5 appraisers on their team.
Yeah, seriously.
And so when in the first role, and you've had the opportunity, some people may or may not know, to have the chief appraiser role. It's more than one firm. When you first moved from the role you had the first time into a chief appraisal role, what was that experience like in terms of what you dealt with and what you had to take on as compared to what you had not done previously?
Yeah, so I worked for a smaller company for a long time, and then I went to a larger private company, or a publicly traded company, I apologize. Publicly traded company, and that was a little bit different because doing these kind of interactions needed approval and getting the little things that needed red tape, and there were so many different parts of it that came along with a publicly traded company that I wasn't ready for. So I enjoyed just getting on the phone and talking and being a little bit more candid and telling you what we're doing and what we're planning on doing and what we're working on. And so that part of it changed for sure. So the red tape and the bigger organization definitely played a bigger part in that, which I wasn't ready for. I was ready just to keep doing what I was doing. So I had to change my mindset a little bit more to know that, I'm protecting the company and protecting the shareholders. So I really got to change my approach to this.
And given that many people have not had an opportunity, at least in this profession, maybe in other professions, but in this profession, to work for a publicly traded company, what you've touched on it already, but maybe in a little more insight from someone who is accustomed to maybe working for themselves or working on a small team, what are some of the not so obvious challenges of actually being in this profession and working for a publicly traded company in that role?
Yeah, fortunately for the company I was at, the appraisal was a small piece of the puzzle. So I just got kind of shoved into a room and said, don't say anything stupid, But I have a good tendency to say stupid things. So
thank goodness there were 4 walls in that room. That's good.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, so really it was just different as far as approval for everything. I think you can shift really fast as a small company and make decisions on the fly that are best. I've approached every company I've worked for like I'm part owner of this organization. So I've always made every decision to do what's best for the company at all costs and make sure that I'm not going to hurt the company. But it takes a little different mindset to say, okay, well, I'm going to do the best, but is that going to get me in trouble if I act on this too quick without permission? How is that going to impact the other lines of business? Is this going to look negative to the company in any way? So I guess just kind of expanding your mindset a little bit and going through all the channels of approval for a lot of the things that you really want to get done quickly. I used to always make the joke as far as I felt like we were a cruise boat racing speedboats. You have smaller companies being able to be agile and move fast, and here we are tugging along, and we got to sit through 8 meetings before we can make a left. That part of it was definitely different.
How did you do in that environment? Some people succeed, many people don't. How did that go for you?
Once I understood, what the risk was and what the challenges were of it, I was fine. I could navigate the channels. You get to know, what you can and can't do. It's fine. It's not too much different at all. And you learn to respect that side of it for sure. And I think that's with a smaller company growing, you run into that too through acquisition or through natural growth. But you start to see that really quickly as the channels that you have to navigate to appease everybody. And it was like I said in the beginning when I first had to make that transition over, it was pretty intense, but it lessened pretty quickly, and I didn't mind it at all at the end.
That's absolutely fantastic. Not everybody has that same type of opportunity to be exposed to that. And yet for you, George, obviously the quality of the work you've done speaks for itself because it's opened up other opportunities. How has each successive opportunity come about for you, say over the last, 3 or 4 roles that you've had?
Yeah, so that last company that I was just talking about, I left there and joined CoreLogic. And that position opened up from a friend there that was not in appraisals, but in a different side of CoreLogic. And I've always been fascinated with CoreLogic, and it's here close to my house. And the opportunity came up, and I took it, and expecting kind of what I was just mentioning, really how to work in this big company. It wasn't like that. It was more siloed, each division. So there was a little bit less red tape and items to navigate, but it was great. I went there and they have a really solid team and had a great time. I was there for about 2 years in that role. And then a friend of mine, Steve French, he took the position as CEO at Settlement One. I was talking to him, and he was building out a team and really trying to get a strong leadership in here. So, I said, oh man, I'd love to be a part of it. That sounds like a lot of fun and really trying to grow. And I heard that the people that were kind of the building blocks of it. And I took the opportunity and came here, and I've been here now for almost a year, and it's been great. It's a smaller team, compared to CoreLogic. I think everybody's a smaller team compared to CoreLogic, but it's a really strong team, and everyone's got a lot of experience. So it takes a lot of pressure off knowing you're coming to work with a team that has a ton of experience in this space, what we're doing right now, and everybody has the same mindset as far as customers first and growing the business. So it's really good process.
This is probably an interesting point where maybe, if not already previously in your career, but again, at this point, it's kind of come full circle where from where you started to where you're at now, you have the opportunity to either, in this case, build out a team. And then what type of people do you look for? What characteristics? If they find, like at this point, do you come across a young George and invest in him in the role you're in? Or do you hey, wait till young George has gotten maybe some dirt underneath his fingernails and worked at a place or two? And because this also provides insight for others who might have, maybe they didn't know or bring that same resourcefulness that you did, which is, hey, I'm just going to throw my hat in the ring. I don't know if I'd actually get chosen or not. And this could open up ideas, not saying they should reach out to you directly, but figuratively, especially we happen to be in the spring of 2023, and depending on what part of the country you're in, you're still getting a lot of snow. But there are signs the market is there and it's going to continue to grow. Snow, what's that? You're in Southern California.
Yeah.
And there are people that are looking for opportunities right now. When they get an opportunity, whether it's with a firm like yours or some others, to apply, if you will, or to be considered, what's going to differentiate them from somebody else?
I think we work in such an interesting industry where it's really hard for an entry-level person to come in and just get a job. So I think you have to be open to that if you want a really solid team. So for me, I'm really looking at the hustle. If I'm looking at their past roles, if they did really well and they work hard and they have the passion for this, I don't think this is the appraisal in general. There's maybe a couple entry-level positions, but I think most of them have to be people that are interested in moving forward with it. And there has to be that passion in the industry because I think that's where you're going to do really well with it. It has such interesting requirements and that side of it that I think that you have to really find the person that's got a lot of passion for real estate in general, but also on the appraisal side. And I had the fortunate pleasure of, helping on the appraisal diversity initiative early on. And, to see what Rachel and the Fannie Mae team has done with that has been so impressive, and you see the people coming out of that. And, the fortunate part we had with that is when we were first sitting with a lot of these participants that were coming there looking at the appraisal industry for the first time at the National Urban League. It was so impressive to see them, coming from a nursing background, a teaching background, or even something completely different. I guess those are pretty different, but, just something completely new to the real estate industry and how much passion they had and how hard they were working. They were there on a Friday night at an event to hear us and let's talk about appraisals. So it's like, man, that is so impressive. And you can't help but root for those people. Jessica Brown, who just got done with the process, she was one of the first people I had the chance to talk to that went into that. And she was amazing. And to see her get licensed and she's working on the right-of-way stuff, it's so impressive. And you take a lot of pride talking to those people, contributing whatever little amount of contribution you had to them getting through that. So I think, really long answer to your question, but I think you really just look at those people that have a passion and have the hustle to get through with it, because it is such a hard road to become an appraiser. The last thing you want to do is waste your effort, and not even just appraisers, but work in the appraisal industry. The last thing you want to do is waste your efforts. Somebody's just there until the next job comes along.
And I appreciate that, because the genesis of this podcast was really around opening up a little view into individuals' careers that have roles that maybe some people don't know anything about, or maybe not have previously considered because they're in the industry, or as you've just touched on, there's a whole nother group of people who really possess the talent and the ability to succeed in the profession. They just don't know anything about it. And so getting that opportunity to hear your perspective shines a light for them to like, oh, wow, maybe appraisal, that's a profession maybe didn't know about or never considered. And yet here are some of the characteristics for people to be successful. I possess those. Wow, I could thrive in this space.
That's really important for them to kind of see themselves in this profession. I think anything you do, you have to visualize whatever you're putting your efforts into, you have to visualize yourself kind of going down that path. And if you just look at the next step is I'm going to work here and that's it. I couldn't do it. And I don't think a lot of people can. So showing them there's different paths you can go. If you want to be a reviewer, if you want to own your own company, if you want to work as a staff appraiser in management, the business side, sales, there's so many different paths you can go. So if you have a passion for the industry, you can find somewhere that's going to make you happy.
Oh, that is an important perspective. Given the time you've been in the industry and given the different roles you've had, once you got to the corporate side, was more of your professional development on the job learning, or was there additional, again, similar kind of question, courses or training or mentoring to help you continue to develop and take on new and many times more significant responsibilities?
Yeah, I think I've never stopped taking lessons. I've never stopped trying to improve on what I know. And I'm constantly learning, working with appraisal files every day. There's so many different crazy problems that come up in a day that you're constantly learning. But really, I think just surrounding myself by really strong peers and having, monthly communication with them and talking to them. I learned so much from, my peers at other AMCs and other lenders by just having conversations and working through difficult problems, because I get stumped, like everybody else does. And to be able to pick up the phone and call a friend and say, hey, am I off on this? Am I crazy thinking this way? And hearing their side of it to maybe either confirm what you think or to tell you are crazy for thinking that way is so valuable to be able to pick up the phone and learn, because I think we have so many smart, driven people in this industry that if you're not using that network and talking to the people that you're working, doing the same job as, and maybe at a different company, you're missing a huge opportunity.
Completely makes good sense. And hearkening back to something you mentioned just a little bit ago, having that early on exposure to working with a commercial appraiser and that level of interaction, and I'll call it peerness, was, please correct me if I misheard you, is not something as much that you experience in residential, but it's an approach that you bring in the space which has all been residential for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I thought it was like that everywhere, because that was my first stop. When I got onto starting my own business and started reaching out to some appraisers in the area, residential appraisers, to ask to have lunch or, go out and have a happy hour or something, they'd act like I was crazy. And why am I trying to get their business? And, what am I doing? And I was really just trying to connect, because I know I'm going to hit a pitfall at some point and I'm going to need some help one way or the other, and maybe I can help them. So I did find that at the Appraisal Institute to have that camaraderie and build some really good connections. And it's really why I've stayed with it for so long. But I think that's really key. And and there are some residential appraisers that do a really good job of it, that network. I didn't have that experience in the beginning, where I didn't see that same camaraderie that commercial had.
How have you taken steps to try, if you have, you might be, well, I don't, but to the extent you have, how have you taken steps to try and foster that throughout your career?
Honestly, I probably haven't done as much as I should to try to help that, because I think a lot of times we have calls and we try to connect appraisers over Zoom calls, or where we hold lunch and learn kind of meetings in an area. We'll invite the local appraisers to come out and have lunch, but it's not always the best turnout, but it does help. You'll see some appraisers start talking, exchanging cards and helping out. But it's something that we probably should do a little bit more of, is try to connect them, especially as a management company working with a lot of them in the same area. I think there's some opportunity there to maybe do more of those, get out in the field and have a lunch and get them connected. I know there are some companies that have done a really good job of that. And I think it's important, because I think that it makes the industry better, and it's better. We serve our clients better if they have a network to rely on to ask questions with.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. In that same line of thinking and just reflecting on your own experience, what can those in the industry be doing along their career to develop themselves that maybe one day they could have a position that you have held or do hold?
Yeah, I mean, I think learning constantly, get involved in some groups, either online or in person. Only advice I have is stay away from the forums for the most part. You're not going to learn too much. Get frustrated.
You mean the rant and run is not a successful place to invest your time and energy?
I learned that early. I got some good advice from a friend who said, stay off the forums. Do not look at the forums, especially when it's slow, because you will hate this profession and you will hate everybody around it. He said, when it's busy, the people that are on there complaining are slow. So why do you want to listen to that? That was good advice. It's good to go on there once in a while when you want to look for something, but to take it, and really strong advice, there's a lot of keyboard warriors that will give you advice that you probably don't need them. That's one advice I would say, is stay away from the forums, get involved local, find some good mentors. I haven't met too many appraisers that don't want to help and that aren't willing to sit down with somebody and tell them about what they've been successful with and what they failed on. And unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of people asking them. So if I had to turn back to the days when I was looking for a trainer and I was looking for somebody, I wouldn't start off to ask, hey, can you take me on? Because, I can't tell you, and you probably have to experience the same thing where you just get calls nonstop. Hey, can you take me on? And I don't know this person at all. I don't know anything at all. And that's what they lead with. So asking someone, hey, can I buy you lunch? Can I come in your office? Can I hear a little bit about the appraisal profession? Do you have some time, 10 minutes? I think that finding those people that they can rely on will pay huge dividends down the road when they do have that problem or they need some experience that they're probably not going to find in many places. You could take a class, you can read a book, but I think getting firsthand from somebody that's dealt with it is really valuable.
That makes a lot of sense and a lot of great wisdom that you're offering at that point. What another thing, your experience, what have you observed, because you've been in different segments of the industry in a similar role, which many people have not had that opportunity. As you reflect upon your different employments, what are some of the most notable accomplishments that you've been able to have in the role, but at different companies that are not apparent to someone who's just out in the field? Like, hey, I got an assignment to go handle this semi-complex home and maybe a small subdivision that was custom built. That's their view of the world. And yet you're sitting, if you will, at a very different stair step on the staircase when people walk in as opposed to down the level up a little higher. How does that show up for you as you reflect on it, George?
I think we do it day in and day out. You don't really reflect on, kind of where you got to. But I definitely think that the most valuable acknowledgement is seeing the company do well, seeing your customers make you their go-to person. When you start having large lenders call you and say, hey, I want to get you on a call because I have a question about whatever it is. And I think that just being that person that's trusted to your clients to be able to give them sound decisions or sound feedback to make decisions is huge. So that and your peers, I think, the best acknowledgement I think I can have is just, seeing clients happy, ordering more, coming from the business side. I think that's where most clients are going to speak with their pockets and who they choose to do work with. Doing that, having a team, seeing our team built out to have really, really strong appraisers and staff and everybody else that can do the job well. I think that is so valuable. And I think that's taking from all the different paths that I've been to get here. I think learning what I've done wrong in the past and adjusting and learning what I could have been better at or what I've done well and take that all to be where I'm at now. And, when we talk in 10 years, I'll probably have a whole bunch of new things, but I think it's important, to kind of learn from each place you're at to, what went well and take a little bit to the next place.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I hear a sense of openness and a real commitment to learn and grow along the way.
Yeah, I think
I was just curious, please go ahead.
I think in making sure that your team absorbs that and, you're not only just barking orders, but helping them grow and get to that next step. So hopefully you can grow the company out to build it out and be bigger and bigger. They have teams under them. And I think that's when you're successful and you can start seeing the people that you really invested a lot of time and effort into do well.
Really inspired by that. One thought that was crossing my mind, because I've been in some of these conversations, but I know many people haven't, which is the level of, how do I want to succinctly say it? In the role that you've been in for the last number of years, you're called to make commitments on behalf of the company in regards to, in this case, many appraisers, maybe those which you directly employ or those which you work with as contractors, that most people that are just doing appraisal don't understand this idea of the commitments that occur between corporate clients, in this case being one that serves another company. Can you maybe touch on that at a high level so people start to get an understanding of, look, it's not just a chief appraiser like, hey, I'm just looking at appraisals. I mean, you're having to make some significant commitments for the present and the future and then go figure out how to deliver on those.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's part that the appraisers a lot of times don't see. And they feel like we're bidding orders for them to bid against each other. And many times it's not the case at all. We're bidding actually against other companies to win that business. So especially when we talk about portfolio loans, the client comes to us and says, I have 300 loans. How fast can you do 300 appraisals and how much can you do them for? So we can't just throw a number out there and a time commitment without doing our due diligence. So we reach out to our partners and try to get that feedback so we can give it to the client and have a realistic expectation. So many times when the file is late, the appraiser calls us back and says, yeah, I had a lot to do. And I said, you could have just told us up front. We would have told them, and we all look good. You can set those expectations up front, but when I have to go back to them and say, we need another week, another 2 weeks. So I know that that's where the frustration lies with the AMCs quite a bit because, like I said earlier in the conversation, there's some good and there's some bad. And unfortunately, you could be the biggest AMC in the world competing with a one-man shop that has that's sending them out, and you're still considered an AMC. So, you really have to, I think as the appraisers pick their partners well, you start to build that level of confidence with each other where now we can call appraisers and ask them for, hey, we got a bulk order coming in. We were trying to figure out the fees. Can you be a little bit more transparent with the appraisers that are running their own business and making their own commitments to their staff and their team, their families, to be able to get, have that partnership to kind of tell them what's going on. I think, as good as technology has got with, sending emails and automating a lot of messages, you kind of lose that that personal touch to be able to tell them where you're coming from and be able to give them a little bit of feedback of why you're asking for what you're asking for. But, I think on our side, you're right. We have to commit to the client, and it's really hard when you don't know the properties, you don't know if they're all burned down or they're all, model match homes. You really have no idea when you're giving this out. So you're trying to get as much information as you can to make a sound, estimate. But at the end of the day, you really rely on the partners and your relationships with the appraisers to be able to back you up with what they say.
Really starts to get into an interesting role. And depending on those who have the opportunity to really soak in this experience that you're sharing, maybe they are just residential appraisers who are in the field. Maybe there are those that are actually staff appraisers for a firm. Maybe there are those that don't do lending work at all. And then by the same token, there's a lot of commercial appraisers that listen, and they could easily sit in those same roles, just a field appraiser or an employee or staff appraiser in a firm, and have that, like you said, broad scope of assignments that come across their desk. And it really speaks to how a company chooses to create alignment amongst not just themselves and their, in this case, the client that they're supporting, but also those that are on the team, either directly or as an independent contractor. And I can appreciate and definitely attest to the difference it makes when you get to work with those that actually take that seriously, as opposed to the other version that you did allude to, and in some cases sadly does exist, where it does really seem like they're just getting the appraisers to bid against each other so that they can expand their margin at the expense of someone else getting the work done at whatever a fee they agree to do it for.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to differentiate yourself in that space when the automated message is going out or appraiser is feeling busy and trying to do that work, even not only on just assignments, but on the follow-up on, on all the other parts of that. I think the appraisers a lot of times don't see the inner workings of the company, where our teams are getting calls from loan officers, especially when it's slower like this. Every loan matters, and every loan that could be paying their mortgage, and that's their survival. So they're all over us, asking for updates, asking for feedback, and we owe it to them. We got to give them that feedback. So and unfortunately for us, if we don't have, up-to-date messages, we have to call that appraiser and bother them when they're out working. So it's something we don't want to do. But on the same hand, when you have somebody on the other side, on our team, we're constantly telling people is you got to treat every file critical, because you never know the situation. There could be a family in a U-Haul waiting to move into a home, and the only thing holding it up is the appraisal. So we definitely don't want to be as hurting the process and delaying the transaction. So sometimes I think the team inside, if you have a really strong team, our team takes it really personal, and they're trying to help everybody out and, keep the appraiser shielded from the barrage of calls and emails, but on the same hand, trying to give the client the update and give them some feedback. So I think there is definitely some disconnect there between the appraiser in the field and what the company side of it does to try to protect all the calls or the reconciliation of the value. Those come in pretty fast and furious when the values drop, that we've seen in some areas. So trying to keep our partners protected a little bit from seeing all those requests, that's a big part of what we're doing inside. And our appraisal team, having appraisers look at it, being able to invalidate a couple of those is a big one to keep the appraisers' sanity, when they're working and they're busy like this.
And I think that's a helpful perspective. I know I didn't always have. And at one point, just by having conversations with clients, beginning to learn about, well, what else do you do? And they're like, Michael, you don't realize how many times we are essentially that first line of defense for your report. And we're doing as much as we can to not have to come back to you, provided that maybe a client request or a concern that's raised can be addressed. And sometimes they can't, and we got to bring it back to you. But otherwise, we do that just so that we maximize the work that you're doing and minimize rework, because nobody makes money on rework. It's an expense. There's no revenue associated with rework.
Yeah, I mean, that's so big because, we'll go back to an appraiser for a revision that we have, or, even maybe not even a revision, just clarification. They'll light us up. And, why are you asking me for this? This is a dumb request. And you really got to explain to them is our clients are giving us volume based on quality as well. So if we give them files that don't have this feedback, we're competing for work just like you are and everybody else is. So we don't want to. It doesn't help us. It just costs us more manpower, and we'd love every file to go through the first time. That would be perfect for everybody, but unfortunately it's not. When you're talking about a complex property or 40 pages of an appraisal, there's going to be things missed here and there. So, we got to be understanding that with our appraisers. They're busy, especially in the crazy times where it was just trying to keep up and keep your head above water. There's going to be some mistakes made and hopefully we can catch that before it gets to the lender and gets, to the investor and everybody else. So if we, a lot of times there's some appraisers that are really, really, really good about it and say, oh, thanks for catching that. That would have been embarrassing if it would have gone all the way through and I made that mistake. Yeah. So, and then there's ones that, take it personal, but really for us on our side, we're just trying to, be good partners on both sides.
I appreciate that. And in light of that, what, obviously, if people can't tell, I mean, there's a real sense of engagement and interest and passion for the work you're doing. What inspires you about the industry at this point of the industry's existence and future?
All the technology that's coming out and it's really people are competing how we haven't seen that in the past. We go to a trade show and I'm looking at several different options for new softwares, new tech, data, new inspection apps. There's so many different parts of it. I don't know where it all falls just yet, but seeing really smart people and really growing and trying to come out with that next product, I think appraisers can have a really, really strong hold in this, and it's going to change. I don't think anybody is absent to that. I think we're in a process right now on the residential side to have some change and have some new tools. And probably, as these technology increases capacity, increases technology, form filling, things like that are making the appraiser's job a little bit easier. Fannie Mae working to change forms and give new information requested as far as in the UADs. I think it's going to change quite a bit. And there's probably some of the older appraisers that are going to say, this is enough, I'm going to get out. But you look at what these firms are doing and everybody making a really conscious effort to get appraisers to come into the industry. Not only AMCs are doing it as well, but firms and Fannie Mae and everybody else really trying to get new blood in the industry. That's inspiring. And when you go out to a conference and you get to talk to them, you hear them say, I don't want to be an appraiser. I want to work on the business side. I want to work on management. I want to get my appraiser license, but I really want to run the business. It's encouraging to hear that side of it, where I think that they're all looking at different options and there's so many different opportunities there. Everyone's kind of going after different paths. But I think really the appraisal industry has been so stagnant for so long that I think it's great to see some blood being poured into it and new people coming in and new technology. And I love seeing all the new options and anything I can use to make it easier and faster. I think that you got to be open to it.
I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Maybe one other thing as we move towards wrapping up, and that is, if you can't tell, George is extremely youthful and probably has how many more decades still in the profession. But what's one more thing that you hope to either contribute to or to contribute in the profession before your time comes to an end?
I think really just trying to help the newer appraisers get a good foothold and feel comfortable in this and keep moving it forward. I think that if we don't share what we've messed up on and stumbled on in this path and not get them to be better appraisers and better leaders in this industry, I think we didn't make our impact on it. So I think just keep working with the new appraisers coming up and the new people coming in the industry, and maybe not even the appraiser side, but just on the business side and the technology side. I think working on that side, if I can be, any little bit of a part in them being successful and the industry making a change, I'd be happy.
And maybe in closing, because we have a whole range of people, both in the industry and outside the industry, it's been wonderful to hear from so many people, especially those outside the industry. Actually, an attorney that we're on a board together, who we've done a little work for him over the years. But he's like, Michael, I never thought I'd have any interest in listening to appraisers talk about the profession, but it's really, I learned a lot. It was really helpful. From that perspective, George, since we have those both outside the profession as well as inside the profession, maybe speaking to those who are in the profession, maybe in that first third of their career as a professional appraiser, or for those that are not yet in the profession but might consider it, what words of wisdom, as you reflect on your yellow brick road that's gotten to where you're at, would you offer to them?
Well, first off, I think the people that are finding it interesting, this is because of you. I think you did a great job. I really enjoyed listening to your podcast and your interviews because I think you do a great job carrying the conversation. I think if I was passing on some information on what I think would help them in their path, is just be open to opportunities. Don't pigeonhole yourself to what you thought you wanted, because there's so many different paths you can go with it, and you can be successful in a lot of different ways in this industry. So be open to it, even if it's something you didn't think you wanted to do. Give it a try and learn it. At least if you don't want to do it, at least learn it and move on. I thought I would have always hated the compliance side of the business, and I had the opportunity to learn that. I really enjoyed it. I really avoided it for decades, trying to not be involved in reading, legal language and trying to keep up on all the state information. But I really enjoyed it. I took to it, and it's something I wish I would have started a little bit earlier. So if I had any advice is, don't pigeonhole yourself into something you think you want. Learn it all and see all sides of it, because, something else you might find it really interesting.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, George, I appreciate you spending about an hour of time here today with us and sharing from not only your experience, but also your perspective, and really grateful for your contribution. And just, I too have an optimistic outlook for what the future is, and it's not going to look like the past, but openness makes it a little less confronting to embrace. And so I really come away with a renewed encouragement in that space. So just want to say thank you. And for everyone, appreciate you being part of this. Continue to share it out, both share it to your clients. That's been one of the fascinating responses I've had from others. Like, Michael, I shared this podcast with some of my clients, and they were grateful and they appreciate it. So don't be miserly, be generous, and keep paying it forward. So George, thank you so much. And everyone, until our next session, onward and upward. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Paru Zings, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing life paths and achievements of our guests. Don't forget to like us on LinkedIn and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Paru Zings, Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.